Hello, welcome to Brap Life. Thank you so much for all of the support that you guys keep giving. This is absolutely amazing to see how far these stories are going. As of today, which is Thursday, this episode will release Friday. This podcast is being listened to in 5 countries outside of the US, which is absolutely amazing. It's so cool to know that so many people across the world want to hear these stories. So I'm really excited to bring them to you. Um, it's it's been an honor, honestly, getting to talk to all these people and hear all these stories. It's been super inspiring, and I'm just so glad that I'm the person who gets to do it right now. So this week's episode features my friend Dmitry, who he says he's an average rider, but there's a lot more to this guy than I originally thought. I met him back in March at a clinic, and the more I get to know him, the more I'm like, dude, you are not average at all. So it was a really cool conversation. I really hope that you guys enjoy it, and I can't wait for more episodes in the next couple weeks. You guys are going to absolutely love the stuff coming up. All right, so here we are. So thank you for meeting with me like this, because I know we originally tried to meet at TKO, and that just turned into chaos.
Yes.
I don't know about for your side, but for my side, I was kind of like all over the place.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It was. Sorry, I didn't mean to
no, you're fine.
interrupt you here.
You're
Um.
fine.
Yeah. Yeah. It was. I should have kind of expected it to be like that because it always seems like whenever you go to a race, especially if it's a multi-day race, it's one of those things where you kind of like look at the schedule and you're like, oh, well, I'm only doing this one thing today. So you feel like you're going to just have so much time to just sit around and do nothing, but it always ends up being way, way more busy than you think it's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah, and then not having service on the TTC grounds was also really hard because, like, when I
Yes.
finally did have time, I couldn't even get a hold of you. So it was just like, dang,
Yeah.
well, that didn't work.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
I've
That's
got to
a,
invest in Starlink.
that's, I've bought one of those in the last 6 months and
Mhm.
I've been taking it everywhere with me just because I'm very fortunate that I work remotely.
Yeah.
And it's a game changer. It's such a wonderful technology. Yeah, just to start some controversy here, I'm not the biggest fan of Elon Musk, but it's he the Starlink thing is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree. I didn't even know about it until like 6 months ago. I'd
Yep.
seen the satellites and I was like, "What the heck is that?" When I was in New Mexico. My friend told me they were it's like satellite internet or whatever, but I was like, "What?" I didn't understand what they meant. Um, but now I
Yeah.
get it. And now
Yeah.
I'm like now I travel and now I'm like, I really need that. Like it would be so awesome to have. So,
Yeah. It's a game changer for sure.
mhm. So, well, first of all, let's talk about how you got into riding, and then I want to hear a recap about your experience at TKO. So, but
Okay.
first, let's start
Sounds
at the
good.
beginning.
So it's and I've listened to a bunch of your episodes, so it's kind of
Mhm,
cool. I think that on your podcast, you have people with a lot of different backgrounds. There's people that have been riding their whole lives, and there's also people that have very recently got into riding, which I think
mhm,
is really cool. So I started riding as an adult
mhm.
when I kind of came from the car side of things. So I've always, since I was a kid, always loved cars, and it's been just a huge passion. The same thing with motorcycles, kind of, but as I think for a lot of people, it's not something I think most parents encourage.
Mhm.
Motorcycling. I mean, some do, some that are riders themselves do, but I think
Mhm.
ones that aren't riders don't for obvious reasons. It's a dangerous sport. There's no
Mhm.
way around it.
Yeah.
Um, so I as when I was growing up, when I was like late high school. I watched a little movie that became a small franchise called The Fast and the Furious, which
Yeah.
which like I think a lot of people of my generation have gotten us into this whole import tuner scene.
Mhm.
So I've gotten really heavily into that and have been then started doing some racing. So I went really heavy into autocross and rallycross first, and
Mhm.
actually did pretty well. I'm a way more talented car driver than I am a motorcycle racer or operator, um, and uh, did pretty well regionally. And then I always kind of I don't know why I do this, but I always gravitates toward more and more difficult things. So
Mhm.
hence why I'm in a bunch of hard enduros now. Um,
Yeah.
it's a theme for sure. So I ended up eventually started doing stage rally, which is a thing where so autocross, rallycross, that's essentially a bunch of cones in a parking lot or a dirt parking lot, and then you can just
Mhm.
use a completely stock daily driver car, and you just do timed runs around the course. It's
Mhm.
pretty chill. You need a lot of skill to do it, but it's not very dangerous.
Mhm.
I say that having rolled a car at rallycross, but it's you're not
Oh my god.
you're not you're not gonna really hurt your car most of the time. Um, but it's stage rally is you go as fast as you can on typically gravel roads.
Mhm.
You have a navigator who reads you. They're called pace notes, which basically describes the
Mhm.
course because you're driving it blind. You've never really, most of the time, you've never ridden or driven those roads before. You don't know what's over the
Mhm.
crests. You're going as fast as you can. So
Oh my gosh.
that's a whole other level of car safety requirements. So that's full
Mhm.
cage, seats, harnesses, fire suppression, fire suits, all that stuff. So it's a dedicated race car at that point. Um,
Mhm.
and so I did that for a few years, and I was actually also pretty successful at it, but it kind of got to the point where it was pretty clear that it was mostly about just spending more money on it. And you just throw money at the car and you go faster. That's
Mhm.
kind of all there is to it. And I don't want to say that there's not no driving talent or anything involved because there's definitely is, but it's a
Mhm.
compared to dirt biking, I think it's at a whole other level. I think
Mhm.
in car racing, it's like 80% car, 20% driver. In dirt biking, it's the other way around.
Yeah.
So it's a much different thing. Like
Mhm.
not even on the same scale. So and kind of around the time when I was getting into stage rally, so I at that point, like I did not, like I said, I didn't grow up with anybody. I didn't know anybody that had raced cars either. I just kind of jumped into that by looking up some stuff on the internet and doing it. So
Yeah.
with motorcycles, I also didn't really know anybody. But right around the time I was getting into rally, one of my
Mhm.
friends was actually selling a. So this was about 15 years ago, probably. So he was selling a street bike, some kind of 600cc Yamaha. I don't remember, it was an R6 or whatever was before the R6. So, something
Mhm.
that should not be a first motorcycle. And I was like, oh, that thing's kind of cool. So I told my girlfriend at the time, like, hey, I'm kind of thinking of buying my buddy's bike. And she's ridden um, dirt bikes as a kid. So
Mhm.
she very smartly said, "You're gonna kill yourself. Why don't like we get a couple of dirt bikes and you can learn how to operate a motorcycle
Uh-huh.
before you like go 100 miles an hour on the freeway or something like that, which was a very smart and adult thing for her to say. Um, as it typically goes. Yeah, I was I think 25 at the time, and I was definitely more like probably mentally a 14-year-old, as most guys are. So we got a couple little TTRs, and again, we didn't know really anything about anything. Um,
Mhm.
I like I think we just went to so we got the bikes used. We got a pretty good deal, and then we just went to a power sports place and bought some like riding pants or jersey, helmet, and goggles. Boots
Yeah.
were kind of expensive, so didn't get boots, which was really stupid. But it's like you don't know anything. Like I didn't know anybody that rode dirt bikes. I
Yeah.
don't know why I didn't go on the internet and maybe research some of this, but it's I think this is also before Facebook groups or anything like that. So
Mhm.
it's like you don't really know what you don't even know.
Yeah.
And coming from being pretty good at racing cars, like I'm like, oh, I kind of know stuff about like motorsports. So I think I
Mhm.
had a little bit of a I know more than I actually do attitude. Um, and then we went. So this is Michigan. We went up north to just the closest trail that we could find, which
Mhm.
anybody that lives in Michigan, which is St. Helen, anybody that lives in Michigan knows what St. Helen is. It's
Mhm.
basically if you put a bunch of sand dunes in the woods, that's what it is. And there's a ton of side by
Okay.
sides. At that time, I think the side by sides weren't as big 15 years ago, but there were still a bunch of like dune buggy looking things, and
Mhm.
anybody on a quads and maybe like 450 dirt bikes because it's all wide and open sand.
Yeah.
And for first time riding a dirt bike is not a good place to go. We just recently, like last couple of years, me and a buddy were doing a big ride and we went through there on our 350s,
Mhm.
and we rode through it, and I told him this story that this was like the first place I ever rode a dirt bike, and he was
Mhm.
like, "Why did you keep riding after that experience?" Because it was horrible. Like, I mean, falling down all over the place. Just I'm like half not on the trail the whole time because it's so hard to ride deep sand if you don't know what you're
Mhm. Yeah.
doing. So I think we went out and maybe another time, and it was an equally sandy place, and after that we just like kind of parked the bikes for a while, and
Wonder why.
yes, it was just not super fun. But then as I kind of started getting more burned out on rally,
Huh.
my my brother, who lived in California at the time, so he got a street bike, and I ended up going out there a few times to just do like essentially I wanted to do adventure riding is what I've kind of realized. Like I wanted to go moto camping, do like the long I think long way around came out around that time, and I'm very apparently
Okay.
very social or media influenced because then I decided I wanted to do adventure biking.
Yeah.
So I so we went on a bunch of rides, and it was actually pretty awesome, and that kind of finally put a nail in the coffin for car racing.
Mhm.
Plus, like I was having a bunch of stress related issues from work and from all this racing, and it
Mhm.
was I knew I needed to make some lifestyle changes, and in a way, the motorcycling in a way kind of ended up saving my sanity and potentially even life in a way. Um, but yeah, it because it was costing probably at least $2,000 per weekend to go do rally stuff.
Mhm.
And that's excluding anything car related. This is just logistics. This is just hotels, gas, entry
Oh
fees, things
my
like that. This is like
gosh.
without breaking anything on the car, 2,000
Yeah.
bucks.
Yeah.
And I think I went out to California and rented a motorcycle, and then we went riding for a week for a
Yeah.
thousand dollars.
Wow.
This is, I mean, this is 10 years ago at this point, so I'm sure now it's probably double all of that, but still.
Mhm.
So, um, as I kind of did more of that adventure style biking, I've also realized that I suck at riding off road. I ended up buying a DRZ 400 in
Mhm.
Michigan because, again, I wanted to do some dual sporting and adventure biking stuff. And now I had a bunch of buddies who went from cars to dirt bikes at this point. So they invited
Mhm.
me out on the trail ride. And and this was single track at this point, and I struggled so bad on that bike. Again, nobody told me anything about anything, so I was there on a big motorcycle, relatively big motorcycle, heavy, like 300 plus pounds, on dual sport tires at 18 psi, on a bunch of sandy single track, and my buddy who I still ride with now, um, he was nice enough to go back. Like I crashed and got stuck literally probably every mile of this like 30 plus mile ride.
My
And
gosh.
he would, I would be riding them in the back. They'd all take off. I'd be stuck
Yeah.
somewhere. He'd come riding back, help me pick up my bike or drag it out of whatever bushes I put it into. Uh, and I mean, he literally did that probably 30 times that day.
Oh
So
my gosh.
I always tell whenever I'm riding with somebody that's new, I always tell them like, don't feel bad about
Mhm.
anything because I am, without exaggeration, the worst new rider that I've ever known. Like it was it was terrible. Um, and then I eventually got a not eventually very quickly got a KTM 350, um,
Mhm.
or 250, sorry, four stroke, because um, I did a dirt bike off road school with my brother where we were on some 250s, and
Mhm.
this is a game changer. This thing feels like a bicycle compared to the DRZ, and so I got one of those, and then I started riding a bunch more because in that I think in that class they pretty much told us like you can learn whatever you want in this class, but unless you ride at least once a month, you're not going to really even keep these skills that you learn. So you need to ride on a regular basis.
Okay.
And so I started riding more, and this was 8 years ago. And that's kind of how it escalated from there. I think
Mhm.
6 years ago, I did my first race. And once I did the first one, I'm like, this is really cool. I need to do more of these. And I started doing more just regular enduros. Started with family enduros, which are kind of a little easier trail timekeepers, and then started doing regular enduros,
Mhm.
and obviously now hard enduro, which is yeah. So that's kind of the progression, and I've been taking it more and more seriously, and it's becoming a bigger and bigger part of my life, kind of as a whole.
Mhm. So, how long ago did you start doing hard enduro?
2 years ago,
Okay.
like official racing hard enduro, and
Mhm.
because I'm from Michigan, so most of my riding historically has been in Michigan, and there is
Mhm.
practically zero even what I would qualify as medium enduro in Michigan. Um, all the
Yeah.
trails here are really fast, so
Mhm.
it's you get really good at riding quickly over sand, whoops, and single track, and there's
Mhm.
thousands of miles of trail, so it's it's a really awesome place to trail ride. But when I did my first hard enduro, which is like
Mhm.
I did a couple attempts, but like my first actual hard enduro was Battle of the Goats last year, and
Mhm.
I've never really ridden at Brushy properly before. I've ridden there one time where we only rode like double track, but
Mhm.
not any of the even single track there. So
Mhm.
it was kind of an eye opener as far as like, yeah, this is hard.
Yeah.
And it's like, you watch videos of people ride like professionals riding hard enduro. You watch video
Mhm.
from like Jarvis or Mario Roman or something, and it
Mhm.
looks easy. And I think like if you watch somebody doing a GNCC or even National Enduro or something, it actually looks
Mhm.
really fast and really scary.
Mhm.
So like my brain understands that that is probably pretty hard to do. But if you
Yeah.
watch somebody riding hard enduro, it looks easy on camera. Like all the rocks look
Yep.
real little. They're not getting stuck anywhere. Like
Yeah.
this looks
Like, float
downright.
over the top. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like this looks downright enjoyable. It's like a trail ride over kind of interesting terrain.
Mhm.
You don't realize that it's at like a 60-degree incline, or the rocks are 3 feet tall, or yeah, anything like that,
Yeah.
or that it's so slippery you can't even stand up on it, much less ride a motorcycle.
Mhm. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I've ridden with Jarvis, and it's just watching him do stuff in real life, it's like, I can't even comprehend how you do that. Like, what just happened?
Yeah,
It's incredible, and, seeing everybody at TKO, like, all these people that I've been watching for years, it was absolutely incredible to watch. Like you said, they just make it look so easy. These hills are absolutely ridiculous. Like, I would never well, I would probably attempt it because I'm just crazy like that, but, I don't have the skill to get up it, but they do. They make it look ridiculously easy, and
right.
then, at some point, like, they trip up or whatever, like, I saw Manny Lettenbichler, like, get stuck, and I was like, "Okay, that's a lot harder than it looks then," but
Yeah, and
it's
even their ability to recover on
Mhm.
some of these hills is incredible. Like the fact that they can side hill some of this stuff is I don't understand
Yeah.
how it's physically possible. Like
Yeah.
it
It's
does not seem like it should work at all. I don't
yeah.
understand how
It's a
it's
little bit of magic.
right. Yeah, and even I mean with Jarvis,
Mhm.
especially because he's such a like he just tractors up everything, and
Mhm.
it their ability to maintain traction is incredible. Both him and Cody is also the same way. Like I've
Yeah.
taken a class with Cody Webb
Yep.
this past spring, and he will like, I like telling this story because it's just bonkers. Like we were going over this big log that's probably at least 5-ish feet tall, like very big log.
Okay, that's
And
me tall, so
it's yeah, it is you have to kind of send it onto the top of that log and also kind of send it down.
Mm.
It's very tall, and it's also
Oh my
slippery
god.
and at a slight angle and in the woods. So there's a bunch of little trees and whatnot around. So most people just essentially launch their bike onto the top of it and hope they
Mhm.
kind of get up onto it enough to push it the rest of the way.
Yeah.
And the run up to it is not straight, and it's through some mud with a bunch of sticks in it. So you don't really even have a good place to launch from. And like we were kind of getting over it. Like I think all of us in the class we could get
Mhm.
over it if we had to, and we did. I didn't want to
Yeah.
do it many times because I thought I was going to probably hurt myself, but it's when Cody did it. So he did it on. He was borrowing a bike. He was borrowing Striker from somebody. It had some random tire on it. I don't really even remember if it was gummy or not. It
Yeah.
had kind of either a tube or some kind of harder mousse in it. So he had less traction than all of us objectively
Mhm.
on the bike, but he could still launch onto the top of that log, get traction on this log that's wet and slippery, and jump off of it, front wheel high, zero wheel spin, zero wheel spin to at the launch, zero wheel spin on the log. It is, amazing. I don't understand how it's possible, but it's incredible.
Yeah, that's absolutely crazy. Like I don't know, like I said, it's magic. It's absolutely got to be magic.
Right. Yeah,
Like I
it's
mean, I know there's techniques and stuff, but like at some point, like nature wins out, right? Like if it's a slippery like giant log, it's a slippery giant log for everybody.
right.
So I don't know. It's crazy. Maybe I just haven't taken enough clinics to figure out how to do all of that, but that just seems like it would be impossible.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of it is their trials background because
True.
it's all about traction in trials. You don't
Mhm.
those trials tires, they don't work at all if you start spinning them. So it's all about
Yeah.
not spinning the tire.
Yeah. That
Uh,
makes sense.
but yeah, it
I
is. It
still
is
I'm still
difficult.
gonna go with magic.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we just don't have it. That's the problem. I think
It's
you
like
got
you gotta hit a certain level and then you get the magic. Like they hand it
right.
out, but you've got to be up there.
Yeah, yeah.
So, did you like the class with Cody then? Like, I mean, it sounds like it was pretty intense. Like, I haven't been in a class that's that intense before.
It's the cool thing about that class was that it was I think it was maybe I'm sure he's done some clinics before at some point, but it was his first, I feel like, kind of more official class. It was right when
Mhm.
he was launching his training platform,
Okay.
this spring.
Yeah.
So it was very small. It was just me and two other students and
Mhm.
Cody. So it kind of
Okay.
felt, and Cody is a very down to earth guy, and
Yeah.
maybe because um, he's not really, he's more of a rider than a teacher compared to somebody
Mhm.
like Rich Larson.
Yeah.
Like Rich Larson's got a whole curriculum essentially because he's been
Mhm.
doing it so much. But and maybe because he's American, so he's kind of more relatable. And I think he's around my age, so he's also relatable maybe from that end.
Mhm.
Because you feel like I felt like I was riding with a buddy, and
Yeah.
it's like, and we just went in the woods and did a bunch of stuff. Like we got some lines and we just did a bunch of laps on them, and then he'd do a bunch of laps on them with us. So you
Mhm.
have this feeling like you're riding with a buddy, except the buddy, when he's coming behind you's got a Red Bull helmet on and is really good at stuff. So, but it
The
was
buddy
it
that's
was
just
actually
showing you
pretty,
up repeatedly.
it was yeah, to some extent, like it was actually pretty funny in a couple instances where um just the way like the lines up some of the hills there worked, like I like kind of put a little block pass on him or something, and it was just kind of funny. You're just like guy go around, and obviously that would
Yeah.
last a whole of like 10 seconds because he could just go up some crazy line that I would not even be able to push my motorcycle up ever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really yeah, it was a lot of fun. Like I think in and I've taken the class with Jarvis too.
Mhm.
um, my impression in general, as far as taking classes with pro riders, is that I think the people that benefit the most from those are riders who are already like pretty good. and
Mhm.
have some very, very specific things that they want to learn. Like if
Mhm.
you're like an A or maybe a pro rider, I think you can benefit a ton from riding with a pro that's
Mhm.
like a world class pro, like Cody or Jarvis, or I don't know if Tristan or Manny or any of those guys do clinics. But
Yeah.
even riding with them, and just watching what they do, or asking them advice for specific things, or having them watch you do something,
Mhm.
and trying to say like, hey, um, is there something that I could be doing better, or something like that. I think.
Yeah, I
So
go
go
ahead.
ahead. I was gonna say, I think um, Rich Larson is a good person for like the general learning of skills.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
Rich or Shane, out of the classes I've taken anyway.
Mhm.
Rich or Shane Watts.
Okay.
Shane Watts is kind of old school. Like he's more of a fast guy, although he can do some pretty sweet wheelies, like slow wheelies. He is,
Uh-huh.
yeah, and just generally his bike control is crazy.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, I
but
was just gonna say I kind of agree with the fact that like having a little bit more experience, you said earlier you don't know what you don't know. And when I did a clinic last year with Jarvis, I was on my TTR. I didn't really know a whole lot about being on the bike and like proper technique and stuff. So it was super overwhelming for me. And honestly, I didn't remember a lot of what we did because I was so focused on like one or two things at the beginning and I was just like
right,
I can't even do this like so it was just like almost got a little bit stressful for me like in the actual clinic because I was just like how am I supposed to be able to do all of this? Well, then my clutch ended up going out on my bike. So that was really fun. Um so the clinic that I did this last time, it was like night and day. Like I learned so much. And even though I'd taken a clinic, it's the same person just a year later. I know so much more now. And it's like I was able to ask specific questions, like you were saying, like, okay,
hmm
I'm not an A rider, but I know that this is something that I've struggled on and like what can I do to get help for that? And
yeah,
the things that really hold me back, I was able to kind of work on. So, and even just since that, what was that like 3 weeks ago, my writing has already improved from there. So, it's just like it was awesome for me because like you said, like you just have to kind of know what to ask. And I mean, I haven't taken a class with Cody other than his online platform, which
hmm
I'm doing, which he explains things super well on there. And I think that that's really cool that he's provided that. But I do personally like in-person clinics because I'm so small and like I have to do things a little bit differently than other people just because of that, because I can't touch the ground like everybody else. So
right.
um it's kind of cool to hear you say that because I definitely kind of agree with that. Like I don't think I mean I've seen people who are pretty new in Jarvis's class and they do decent, but they also have to kind of know like what it is they want to work on. So if you don't have that like any idea at all, that would be really overwhelming.
And it's also one of those things where, like, I kind of, and all of these classes are expensive, so like
Hmm.
I have quite a few friends who I think hesitate
Hmm.
taking classes because it's not cheap, and you have to consider travel as well. So it ends up being a pretty expensive day or a couple of days.
Hmm.
Um, so, and a lot of people, maybe especially ones that haven't taken classes before, I think go into some of them with an expectation that there's going to be some sort of massive revolutionary change after
Yeah.
a day of, you know, best case 6 hours of riding.
Yeah.
And really, that's never the case, because the class is only, for the way I approach it anyways,
Hmm.
these days, is if I can go to a class and take away one thing and just kind of like
Hmm.
add that to my toolbox,
Mhm.
learn one new thing, or maybe learn one thing that I've been doing wrong
Mhm.
in the past, maybe have a bad habit corrected or something like that.
Mhm.
And or maybe take away something that I need to practice more, some drill or something like that. Um, like the class that I took was with Nick and Catherine, the leaky mushroom one.
Mhm.
Like I've there we kind of covered a lot of the basic stuff, but the main thing that I've taken away is some of the traction management stuff that we've
Mhm.
learned when playing on the slippery hill.
Mhm.
So, and the fact that you have to be a lot more aggressive with the release of the clutch, for example. So
Okay.
that's kind of the way that it works for me, and the understanding that, like, I don't know why it's like this in a lot of motorsports. I saw the same thing in the car world, and it's, I think, the same thing in street motorcycling, same thing in dirt biking. For whatever reason, we don't treat this as like any other sport where everybody knows that you have to do a million drills to be good at something. You
Yeah.
have to do, like, if you want to be good at basketball, you're going to be outside shooting hoops or doing practice games, whatever, hours
Yeah.
and hours and hours every day, maybe every other day. With
Mhm.
motorcycling, for whatever reason, we think we can spend like an hour practicing something and then we're going to be pros. Uh, I don't know why that is, but that's the thing. And
Yeah.
especially from a beginner perspective, I think the pros all know that, yeah, you're not good. That's not how that works.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for anybody that's a beginner, I was a beginner recently. I've ridden with a lot of beginners, especially
Mhm.
those coming from the car world where they were maybe like pretty good at driving a car. Yeah, they'll buy, and I was in the same place. Like, you buy a dirt bike and you go in a parking lot, learn how to ride it, like kind of okay, and think you're gonna be the next, I don't know, Caleb Russell or whatever, blasting down some trails. But really, it is about doing a lot of drills,
Mhm.
and that's, you kind of got to do it. And I think your progression probably was faster than a lot of other people out there, because you do kind of focus on specific skills and work the little drills
Mhm.
instead of just going out and trail riding. Um, and
Yeah.
and I mean, there's nothing wrong with trail riding, but you just have to be cognizant that that's what you're doing. You're trail riding, and you're having fun with that, sweet. But if you're wanting to kind of improve your skills, you have to do
Mhm.
drills, and
Yeah.
that's what I actually like about Rich's class and Shane's class, is that they really break down specific techniques into like these little tiny chunks that you can
Mhm.
practice easily
Yeah.
on your own. Whether it's, with Rich, it's all about power delivery and collection, as he likes to say, which is super important in hard enduro. That's all it is. Like,
Mhm.
traction, hard enduro, managing your traction that's like 90% of it. And Shane is, he's more of a fast, like, enduro guy, and for him
Mhm.
it's, turns, and so it's amazing how good you can get at turning by just doing a lot of circles, like just going in a circle for, I don't know,
Vroom,
thousands of
vroom, vroom.
circles.
Yeah.
It's Yeah, it's the stuff like that that's I personally think it's a lot of fun, but I get that some people, when they get on a dirt bike, they want to go have fun and not go do circles.
Yeah, and I think originally when I was on my TCR, it was kind of like that. I only ever went out and trail rode. I didn't really, well, I didn't really know about like feathering your clutch and stuff like that. No one had told me any of that. I didn't know about body position. So I was just out there kind of doing whatever. Like, and then once I found out about that, I was like, I am on the wrong bike for all of this. So I took my first clinic. I think it was June or July. It was July of last year, and immediately was like, okay, I'm going to need a new bike soon. When previously I had been told that I was never going to get off of the TTR because I'm so small and that I was never going to be able to build my skills to get off of it. And then I went through that clinic and I did my first little mini wheelie and I was like, okay, this has sparked something. I don't know what this is, but I'm definitely like driven now to get better at this. So, and once I got the new bike, um, it was just, it was so much determination to get good at riding that bike the way that it is because my bike's not
Mhm.
lowered. So I knew I was going to have to put a lot more work into it rather than just ride it on the weekends like I was doing before. So I knew it was going to take a lot more skill to do what I need to be able to do and want to be able to do on the bike. And that's kind of what all this is born from, like just wanting to improve. And like you said, there's nothing wrong with going out and just trail riding if that's what you want to do. But my goal has always been since I got a dirt bike to ride hard enduro. So now that I have a bike that's capable of it, I'm like, it's like right there. So close.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's kind of interesting. Like I see a lot of people that I don't actually don't know if this is like a chicken or egg type of situation, whether it's a certain character of person that gets into these difficult things and then is able to progress through them, or if
Mhm.
the progression is born from the fact that it's not easy for somebody. So, like,
Mhm.
there's certain people that are super talented, and I'm sure we all have friends who you look at them like, oh, it's like they're so talented, and I wish they would just try a little bit harder and they would be so good, but
Yeah.
they don't because because they're used to things being a little easier for them. They don't want to try super hard. um,
Yeah.
I don't know where that comes in, or maybe they just don't want to try hard and they get their difficulty in other places. But
Yeah.
it's also I mean, there's also different mindsets. There's like I think Gypsy Tales talked about this at one point, that there's like spectrum of some people are pleasure oriented and some people are growth oriented, and there's
Mhm.
this whole spectrum of just depending on what people enjoy and value in life. Some
Mhm.
people value, they go to work and earn money so they can go take a vacation and sit on the beach all day.
Mhm.
Some people go to work and earn money so they can go push a motorcycle up a muddy hill all day. So it's a different mindset, and different people get enjoyment out of different things.
Yeah. Well, speaking of mindset, so it's a good transition. Um, as you know, one of the things that we usually talk about is mindset. So, like, when you're in a race, like, what keeps pushing you? Like, if you get into something, and I don't know if this is what happens for you, but if you get into something that's really frustrating, really hard, you're having a difficult time on, um, like, kind of, what does your mindset look like at that time, and how do you basically like keep going?
So, and I think it's probably different for everybody.
Mhm.
I think some people are just stubborn. I think there's a lot of stubborn people in hard enduro specifically.
Yeah.
For me, like it's the fact that I know that I'm going to feel really bad about, I don't know, myself or just in general if
Mhm.
I give up. That's the biggest thing. Like my very first hard enduro, which I don't really even consider doing a hard enduro because I didn't get very far, was Mad Moose in, I'll say it was 2020. I think it was the COVID year,
Mhm.
and it was I was on a old gas, the one that's now Raihu. It's
Mhm.
kind of a, it's a taller and heavier bike. It was a little bit too much for me, especially at the time. I think I was
Mhm.
on a hard moose, no fan. I also did not know what I was doing. That's probably the biggest problem. And it was like 85 degrees and raining. So it was crazy hot. And I got a mile into that race and
Mhm.
my bike was boiling. I was out of water. It took me probably like an hour and a half to get a mile in.
Wow.
And it was, yeah. And the biggest problem, and I was in C class and I was the very last person. Like Sweep was directly behind me. I think
Mhm.
I didn't officially wasn't last because a few people have already given up, but
Yeah.
um, so there was like nobody out there to help me. I
Mhm.
made the mistake of letting the crowd go in front of me, and they were
Mhm.
helping each other up stuff, and I was just by myself dragging my bike up these super slippery rocks.
Mhm.
It was Sweep kind of standing there and like looking at me and you know giving me a pep talk, but they can't help you. Um,
Yeah.
but at that point, like even before I actually officially gave up, I like mentally gave up. Like I knew I was going to give up, and I
Mhm.
think that's the thing that you can't even think about giving up. Once you
Mhm.
once you think about like, oh, maybe I should just call it quits and go back to the truck. That, at
Mhm.
least for me, like I'm done at that point. Like if I even consider it,
Mhm.
it's finished. So
Okay.
and like at the races, usually there's not any big moments. Like there's moments that will get me kind of frustrated to where
Mhm.
stop I'll maybe stop competing,
Mhm.
if that makes sense. Like if I'm in the front, which happens way too often because I make stupid mistakes, but like I'm pretty good fast rider, so I can usually get
Mhm.
off the line good, and through that initial single track, especially in C class, like I can typically be like one of the first people into the technical sections. But then I immediately
Mhm.
screw them up, and a whole bunch of people go past me, and
Uh-huh.
that's really frustrating, and it's really hard
Yeah.
for me to recover from that and get back into kind of trying to push it again.
Yeah.
So that's something I'm kind of working on, and I think I'm better at it now. But it's still it gets in your head,
Yeah.
and but what was I going to say? Um, the one good example of like not giving up is actually TKO last year.
Mhm.
Was I think it was a little bit hotter or maybe a little bit more humid, and
Mhm.
after after the first race, so for people that are listening to this, maybe not super familiar with TKO, the way that it works is typically there's a hot lap on Friday that's a very short course. It's about a mile, pretty easy. And that just sets your starting position for the first of the two races on Saturday. Then the first Saturday race, both Saturday races are for amateurs, so no pro riders. The first race on Saturday, it's about 10-mile course, medium difficulty typically. Um, it's designed for people to be able to finish it. It's not designed for people to push their bikes a bunch. And you get 2.5 hours to finish it. And the first 200 people that finish the race in 2.5 hours go to race two on Saturday, out of which the first 30, I think, is that right?
Mhm.
Because the top 30 go into the pro races on Sunday, which has a whole
Mhm.
other format that I don't remember because that's not my race. Um, and the second race on Saturday is a little bit more difficult. They add a couple more difficult sections, but it's generally the same course as the first race.
Mhm.
So, so last year I did race one. I think I finished it. I finished it in about 2 hours, and I was cramping up super badly. Like
Mhm.
my hands did not work almost at all.
Oh, no.
And like I finished the thing, and I'm just at the finish, like trying to ride my motorcycle back to the pits, and I look at the scoreboard, and I'm like 201, I think, or something. I'm like, thank God, I don't need to do race two. And so I go back to my truck. I kind of start and I chill out, and mentally, I'm kind of like, I don't know what the final scores will be, so I'm still kind of thinking maybe I'll need to race. So I'm not really completely relaxing.
Mhm.
And then somebody comes and shows me like the picture they took. It's like, oh, congratulations! I'm like 197th. Like, no, I have to go race the second race.
Yeah.
So I, try to cool off as much as I can, but still, started the second race. I'm like kind of okay, but the first rock garden we go into, like 100 feet into the course, my entire body is just one giant cramp. My
Oh,
arms are
no.
cramping, my back is cramping, my legs are cramping, and I'm just thinking, okay, well, I'm just gonna putter through this thing and just keep going. I'm already cramping. Like, I can go back to the truck and cramp, or I can sit on this motorcycle and just kind of try to ride and see how far I'll get.
Mhm.
And I finished the course. I finished it. I think I started on the very last row,
Mhm.
um, with three other people. I think a bunch of people didn't start the second race. They just
Yeah.
decided they were not going to do it. But so I was kind of the one of the last people to start, but I ended up passing a whole bunch of people that were in various states of heat exhaustion, which is
Mhm.
not pretty. They just kind of kept chugging away, and made it to the finish. But unfortunately, I made it to the finish when they were already about to start the pros, so they already switched the timing. I think because there were so many people just quitting, that
Yeah.
even though I still had time, they just decided, okay, well, nobody's coming through anymore.
Nobody's gonna come. Yeah.
Right. So, but I'm like, oh, I still felt accomplished enough.
Mhm.
Um, and it was, yeah. So that's the whole thing for me, is just like, just as long as me or the motorcycle is not in danger of like grievous harm of some sort,
Mhm.
just keep riding, slow down, just keep going.
Yeah. So, how was TKO last year versus this year?
So this year, I think the course was a little bit more difficult, but it was a little bit more or less humid,
Mhm.
um, and I don't know if it was drier or not. I think it might have been a little drier. I think they got
Mhm.
a little bit of rain last year, like during the week before the race. This year it was
Yeah.
bone dry. Like, there was no moisture anywhere. It was actually kind of
Mhm.
amazing. And I did, so I put in a lot of kind of training effort over the winter, and I actually did way better. I managed to finish, I think some like 46, I think, on in race one, something like that,
Yeah.
and then 140 is something in race two. So I finished race one in an hour and 20 minutes, and I think race two in an hour and 40 minutes or something, an hour
Mhm.
46 maybe.
Yeah.
And I felt like I started getting a little bit of cramps in race two, like my hands and legs, but not anything terrible. Like, I didn't need to stop or anything. I just kind of either slowed down or try to relax, try to ride it a
Mhm.
specific way so that it's kind of try to relax those specific muscles.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's somebody mowing the lawn outside.
That's fine.
Yeah, so it went way better. Like last year was about survival. I think
Yeah.
in the hard enduros in general, last spring and TKO was kind of about survival. In the
Mhm.
fall, I kind of felt like I started racing a little bit, and this year there was actual all spring was racing. Romaniacs was racing, and TKO was racing. So it's
That's really cool that you did Romaniacs. How was that compared to like the US races? Like, was it super different? I mean, obviously the terrain was very different, but
yeah, yes. Well, yeah, it was very different in kind of all aspects. It's a very big race,
Mhm.
both time wise and distance wise and organization wise and cost wise and everything. It's almost like a completely different thing than what we're doing in at these races.
Mhm.
Even like when you compare something like River Monsters or one of the just the U.S. hard enduro. Battle of the Goats is
Mhm.
decently big, but like one of the kind of normal rounds of our hard enduros to TKO. Like TKO is a much bigger production. Like
Mhm.
there's just walking through the pits, you can see that. You can see the giant KTM pits are there. There's tons of vendors. There's like music playing. Red Bull's there, obviously, so they put on a show of music and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And Romaniacs is like another step in that direction. And TKO is, it's also 3 days. It's a whole thing. And
Mhm.
Romaniacs is technically 5 days of racing, but you pretty much have to be there for like 8 to 10 days. Um,
Did
it's a big deal and it's expensive, obviously, but you kind of almost feel like you get your money's worth because you're there for so long,
Mhm.
and you kind of live the life, and it's just such an immersive experience.
Yeah.
I kind of like I really enjoy those kind of races, and honestly, like I've the whole reason why I started doing hard enduros to begin with is because I kind of knew I probably wanted to do Romaniacs,
Mhm.
because it combines a lot of the things that I like together. So it's a hard enduro rally. So I like
Mhm.
rallies and I like hard enduro, and
Mhm.
it's the combination of those two. And you feel like you're actually going places. It's in a cool country. You get to see all kinds of cool terrain. Um, yeah, it's a really cool event, and there's so much that goes into it as well from
Yeah.
a logistical perspective, and I almost feel like things like training and that kind of stuff is less important, but you have to have you have to have all that stuff under control, because
Mhm.
whereas for a 1 day hard enduro or even a 2 day hard enduro, you can kind of show up and just do it in survival mode, like don't sleep, don't eat very well, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Romaniacs, you will probably literally die if you try to do it that way, because
Yeah, there's
it's
no surviving that.
no, it's just so long. Then you have to keep track. You have to really look after your body. Like you got to make sure
Mhm.
you're sleeping well. You got to make sure you're hydrated all the time. You have to make sure you're eating pretty much everything that you can possibly eat all the time and as much as possible.
Give me
You
all
have
the
to,
food.
yeah, yeah, and you have to make sure you're doing all the right things at the right time with the right stuff, because you have to be all these different places
Yeah.
with your things at the right times, and um, especially initially, it's kind of a lot to keep track of.
Yeah.
Once you kind of get into the groove of the off road days, it's pretty easy, but it's still, yeah,
And
it's an
you
effort.
rented a bike over there, right?
I did, yes,
Cool.
yes. I went through um, a company called Carpathian Adventures, which
Hmm.
is I would highly recommend to anybody. It's a really awesome outfit. Um,
Hmm.
if you're probably familiar with Cross Training Enduro, the YouTube
Hmm.
channel, Barry Morris. So he did a bunch of essentially ads for them. So you can
Hmm.
find his kind of riding with them on YouTube. I think he did some of the video stuff for them as well. I think that they kind of know each other back from
Yeah.
Australia. But um, it's an outfit that's run by a an Australian and a British guy, and they're kind of the, I wouldn't even necessarily say the brains behind the operation, because they wouldn't necessarily want. They're kind of the organizing people
Okay.
potentially, but really the whole the work gets done by mostly Bobo and Victor, two Romanian guys, and they run tours, and they do bike rental service for Romaniacs. So
Okay.
they so last year, me and a buddy of mine, we went took a tour, and
Hmm.
just to get a feeling like, hey, do I want to do this Romaniacs thing? Which for anybody
Yeah.
wanting to do Romaniacs, I would highly recommend that. The very first of all, know how to ride a motorcycle pretty well. Maybe do some US hard enduros, because that is way cheaper than doing anything abroad. That as the first step, and make sure you
Mhm.
actually enjoy it, um, and then go do a tour, whether it's Carpathian Adventures or whoever else. There's a lot of people that do riding tours in Romania,
Yeah.
and so we really enjoyed the tour. The group was awesome. You stay in their little farmhouse in this little village. You ride from there
Hmm.
into the mountains every morning, and then you spend all day riding. You come back, you have one awesome dinner, and you hang out, and it's really enjoyable. The guides are great. You can ride. We had a pretty small group. It was me, my
Hmm.
buddy, and another guy that joined us, and we were all pretty similar level, so it worked out well. Um,
Yeah.
but you can ride whatever. I mean, you can ride easy two track stuff, or you can ride any level of difficulty of hard enduro you can possibly imagine, because there's
I mean,
everything from,
it's Romaniacs.
yeah, I
It's
mean,
like,
and there's any sort of terrain. You If you want to
yeah.
ride creek beds, you can ride creek beds. If you want to ride rocks, you can ride rocks. If you want to ride alpine, you can ride alpine. There's If you want to ride single track, there's single track. Yeah, and it's and if you're thinking of doing Romaniacs, the guides can take you, and it's pretty hard to figure out what class you want to be in. So the
Mhm.
guides can take you to say like, okay, here is, maybe you watched a lot of YouTube videos and you think you're real good at hard
Mhm.
enduro. They can go and take you to some silver and gold lines, and yeah, if most people that are gold legitimately know they're gold, but I
Yeah.
think a lot of us amateurs think we're gold until we visually see a gold hill that doesn't look like any animal or machine can ever go up it, and or down it for that matter, like without actually just vertically falling down. It's kind of insane. So it's a really good experience to even understand. Spend $2,000 on a tour before you spend $10,000 on a race type of thing.
Yeah.
And yeah,
So, like, I've been watching like Romaniacs and Erzberg for a long time, like way before I got a bike, and they look intense, like on all the videos and stuff. like how much more intense is it in person? Like on a scale of 1 to 10. Like
So
what is real life?
I don't know about Erzberg. Um,
Mhm.
I've never been there. I honestly have no desire to go
Oh,
to Erzberg
yeah. No, I'm
personally.
just I like they're
But
just both epic races, so that's why I
yes,
included it. Yeah.
I think Romaniacs is, again, you need some motorcycle competency. But I think Romaniacs is actually very doable by like your average person. Um,
Okay.
because most of the stuff that the Romaniacs is super long. Like every day is between minimum of 100 kilometers, and
Mhm.
most of the times it's, at least this year. This year they have some long ones. It's usually closer to like 150 plus kilometers, so
Mhm.
100 miles essentially. And it's what you see on the coverage is like 100 feet of the gold section typically,
Mhm.
or maybe like a couple 100 feet of a couple of gold sections. When so I did iron class, and which was actually pretty like reasonably easy, by especially by American hard enduro standards. But you
Mhm.
have to keep in mind, in American hard enduros, we, as a, unless you're a top A rider or a pro rider, you are probably doing one, at best, one lap of like a 10-mile course.
Mhm.
TKO being the exception, that's a pretty easy course. But like typical hard enduro, if you can make it an entire lap of a 10-mile course, like you should
Mhm.
be pretty proud of yourself. Um, it, in Romania, you have to do 10 times that distance wise, so you don't really have time to be dragging your bike through a bunch of stuff.
Mhm.
So you need to, whatever class you choose, you need to be able to like clear everything without needing to spend 40 minutes going up one hill, because if you do,
Mhm.
you're just not going to make the distance, and they will actually time bar you pretty quickly.
Okay.
So that's so in the iron class, like I didn't see very many spectators at all. Like usually you just see them at the starts and the finishes, and I think it's
Mhm.
similar for the gold class. Like they show you a tiny little section, and what you don't realize is those guys have also, like, they ride that gnarly section plus probably
Mhm.
another like 6 sections like that, plus another 100 miles of like medium enduro terrain to get there
Jeez.
at like at speed too. If you're a top level gold pro, you're hauling. Like it's that was the thing in iron. So I ended up, I was kind of having a, like, I finished the prologue in 35th, I want to say. So I started 35th out of 150 riders, which was actually a pretty decent position to start in. And then I finished day one, I want to say 14th, which was honestly better than I was expecting. I went in thinking top 50, this is probably where I should be. Like I knew a bunch of people from the US hard enduros that have gone there, ran different classes. I kind of knew approximately what my relative speed will be in a class. Like if I could
Mhm.
get into the top 20, that would be incredible. So when I
Yeah.
was running 14th on the first day, I'm like, oh, that's actually pretty good. And like I wasn't riding particularly fast. Like I was actually kind of enjoying myself.
Yeah.
Second day, I ended up going, mostly because I was riding with this guy that was just riding super fast. This Spanish
Mhm.
guy that like barely spoke English and was just riding behind me the whole time, not wanting to pass me. He was just riding behind me and just saying "Vamos, vamos," and just he was hauling ass. Finally, towards the end of the day, he decided that he wanted to go even faster because I think he was just trying to podium or something. And
Yeah.
I like, no, I need to finish. I'm in iron because I want to finish. If I wanted to not finish, I'd be in bronze. So, um, but I ended up, I think I ended up 10th on that day. And
Mhm.
I kind of ended up riding 11th, 10th every day, but because some people dropped down, some people came up, I actually ended up 8th overall in iron for the entire event, which was way better than I thought I could do. But the pace is crazy. Like it's like a 5 to 7 hour hair scramble. You are going
Jeez.
super super fast the entire time, um, like just not stopping. Like I think I lost some hearing from just hearing my bike wide open for such long
The
periods of
whole
time.
time.
It's but it's still like you have to pay attention because there's a lot of like it's still like pretty technical terrain, and there's a lot of stuff that's maybe not difficult, but stuff that is very sketchy. Like
Mhm.
you might be riding on a little 2 track, and all of a sudden there's a giant hole or a washout or um, a bunch of rocks you have to go over, or like all of a sudden a loose hill climb or a super steep descent, or you're going
Mhm.
down a super steep descent and all of a sudden it like does a 90-degree turn and you're in slippery grass. So like you can't just haul butt without like not paying attention.
Yeah.
So it's very mentally demanding, and you have to be kind of really smart. I mean that same Spanish rider that I was riding with, like because he was pushing the pace so much.
Mhm.
Um, he there were a couple times I came up to him where he's like fixing his motorcycle because he just went over the handlebars or something. Yeah,
Oh,
it's
jeez.
but
That's
I just
crazy.
saw was um so so yeah, it was very fast paced in iron, and everybody's running cone valve suspension and everything in top 10. I'm sitting there on a like bone stock gas, and I'm just looking around and I'm getting suspension envy because I'm basically feel like I'm going to get killed the entire the not the entire time, but whenever it gets really choppy, like you kind of have to be on your A game. You can't hit stuff super hard.
Yeah. So if you were gonna talk to somebody who, well, let's put this into two parts. Somebody who's new to hard enduro in general in the US, if you could recommend something to them, whether it's training, nutrition, classes, whatever, what's the best piece of advice you could give for running a US hard enduro? And then kind of the same thing for running Romaniacs. Like, is there a big difference on the advice that you would give?
I would say yes. The the main thing for I think any event, any racing event or any racing
Mhm.
discipline, the best thing you can do is just do an event. That's because there's so much to it, and you don't know, like you were saying earlier. It's just there's so much where you just don't know what you don't know,
Yeah.
and until you go and do an event, you don't really know what you should be training. And I say this from personal experience. I had
Mhm.
countless times where I would spend a bunch of time practicing something or working something, and then I would go do a certain kind of race or something and be like, I just wasted weeks or months of my time on working on something that doesn't matter and not working on the
Mhm.
things that do matter. So that I think that's really the biggest thing is just show up and kind of do the events because there's racing is very different from trail riding, so
Mhm.
it's it really helps just doing it. With hard enduro though, there is a little with US hard enduro specifically. I guess Romania
Mhm.
as well. There's a way to cheat this a little bit because the races happen at just riding areas, and a lot of times they leave the course almost marked. Like if you go over to Kairos where River Monsters happens, all the arrows are
Mhm.
still there. Like you can literally go ride the hard enduro course, and as I found out, a lot of people do, and the people that place pretty well in their respective classes at those events, a lot of
Mhm.
times do that because they've ridden that course a million times.
Mhm.
Like I did pretty well at Battle of the Goats, especially in the qualifier, because the hardest part of the qualifier was Chicken Fight Hill, and
Mhm.
I've gone up that hill dozens of times within like the couple months leading up to that race. So
Yeah.
it's if you just know the terrain, that's super helpful.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, just doing an event, I think, is the main thing for. Um, but it's obviously there's a bunch of base fitness and other things. So I
Mhm.
would almost say, like, if somebody wants to do a hard enduro, it's actually a good idea to go do a regular enduro potentially,
Mhm.
because those are a lot. They're a lot less difficult, for sure, as far as actually finishing the event. A lot less
Mhm.
damaging to your motorcycle if you just throw it down a bunch of hills. So that's usually a good thing. Uh,
Mhm.
so yeah, just even doing a regular enduro, and they will show where it's like, oh, I might need more fitness, so I don't know how to take corners, or yeah, as far as skills as well.
Yeah.
So those are usually a good idea. And for Romaniacs, the biggest thing is, like I said, I would say taking a tour is
Mhm.
very important because you don't want to go there and pay all that money and then be like completely blown away by the terrain that you have to be on.
Mhm.
Because even in um, like Iron class and even in Atom class, there's some pretty steep downhills specifically. Like uphills, there's nothing too crazy, but
Mhm.
there's some downhills that are really intimidating and crazy, crazy long with a bunch of ledges. When you're like also on a ridge line, going over some ledges, trying not to fall off a ridge. So there's stuff like that, and it's if you haven't done a bunch of downhills like that, or at least you don't know that they are going to be there, it's I think it will be potentially a bad time.
All right.
Yeah.
Good to know. So, when you were getting ready to do Romaniacs, did you personally do any kind of like fitness training or change of diet or anything like that to get ready for it?
I kind of. So I
Mhm.
this has been a a long journey for me in general as far as fitness and nutrition. Like I mentioned
Mhm.
earlier, I've had 10 years ago, like I had a really stressful job. I was doing all this car racing stuff, and I just was working for essentially a startup
Mhm.
where we did a lot of drinking and a lot of really bad eating, and
Mhm.
it completely destroyed my body in every possible way. And up until I really started riding dirt bikes, I was also just basically a computer nerd. Like I've avoided physical activity in any way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
And luckily, I'm fortunate that like I grew up eating pretty well in my family. So otherwise, I would probably be 300 pounds at that point. So it's that at that point, that's kind of when I decided, okay, I need to change my diet and actually eat normally. And
Mhm.
as I started doing more and more riding, I've started taking it kind of more seriously. And I don't do anything diet wise, any anything too special, because
Mhm.
for me, I just found that whatever I do, whether it's diet or exercise, the main thing is that it has to be sustainable. I
Mhm.
think that's where maybe people that fail at trying to change their nutrition struggle is that it's easy to fall into some sort of Instagram diet or workout routine
Mhm.
where it's just not sustainable. Like, yeah, maybe being super like eating only steak and cucumbers is really good for you, but like how long can you sustain that? It's
Yeah.
not, it's just not a thing. So yeah, for me, I just keep it simple, try not to eat junk food. And like I read it some um, fitness book a while ago, but I really like this system and it works well for me. Obviously nutrition is different for everybody, but
Mhm.
where I just divide my plate in thirds and I have one third protein, one third some kind of like carb starch thing, and one third something green or vegetable. And
Mhm.
it's like it's pretty balanced, pretty nutritious, and
Yeah.
it gives me a lot of variety, and it's not very complicated.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just try to keep it more or less simple, and also the being like I find that if you can find something you can be successful at like 80% of the time versus
Mhm.
100% of the time, it's much more sustainable. And then you can
Mhm.
20% of the time, like, hey, I'm coming back from a race and I want to stop at Waffle House, then I'm stopping at Waffle House.
That's totally acceptable. Yeah.
And yeah, and for fitness, I've actually um, been doing enduro method the
Mhm.
last couple of years. So I
Mhm.
3 years ago, I broke my leg pretty badly, and which I couldn't walk for like 4 months, and it was almost a year until I was up back on a motorcycle.
Wow.
And as part of the recovery from that, I decided, I'm going to I already, have to do all this physical therapy, which I honestly always enjoy. It's like a free, after you pay your deductible, a free personal trainer. Which if you go to the hospital, you paid your deductible, so you basically everything else is free after that.
Yeah.
So, yep. Till you guys
Yeah.
kick me out, I'm coming to this physical therapy. They literally had to basically kick me out.
Oh my
We
gosh.
can't have you running here on this treadmill next to all these grandmas. So I started doing the enduro method program,
Mhm.
which, along with my kind of diet theory of keep it simple and sustainable,
Mhm.
um, is another program that's kind of like that. They have different tracks, one of which you can do from home with kind of minimal equipment,
Mhm.
and I think a lot there's a lot of there's definitely a lot of value in, for me anyways, to pay somebody that knows what they're doing to give
Yeah.
me a program that I can follow so that I
Mhm.
don't have to do that research. And it works super well for that. And it's
Mhm.
because it's such a time investment that you might as
Mhm.
well spend your time wisely. And yeah, it's a lot of boring stuff that doesn't look cool on Instagram. A lot of lunges and squats and burpees and things of that nature, push ups, pull ups, yeah, lifting
Okay.
stuff. It's very basic movements that work the big basic muscles, which is kind of I think exactly what you need on a dirt bike.
Mhm.
And it's
That makes
been
sense.
it yeah, and it's been very very effective for me. I mean, it's been since I started doing it, it just makes everything easier. Like, you crash way less. If you need to dab something, you can. You can hit stuff a lot harder and not feel like you're getting bounced off the bike or around the bike. Uh,
Mhm.
Obviously, in hard enduro, where you need to deadlift your motorcycle on a regular basis, when I don't know why it's maybe I just keep getting these like defective motorcycles. Mine always fall down the hill. I don't understand why every time. So I'm probably better than average at picking up my motorcycle from some
Oh,
kind of
that's
hill
so
recovery
funny. I
scenario.
always say that because, like, well, since getting this bike, and I just like constantly was like falling over all the time. And it was like I wasn't even moving really, or I'd like stop and then I'd just like fall. And it was just, I call it the boop because that's all I do, just like boop right over.
Yep.
And so I've probably picked up my bike like 100 times per ride, like without falling on the trail a single time, like because of an obstacle or anything like that, just because of stopping. I hate when people stop on the trail
Yeah.
because I have to like look for somewhere to put my foot. Well, that was before a couple weeks ago. So a few weeks ago, then I took this clinic and I started kind of getting a little bit more comfortable moving on my bike. And now the last 2, 3 rides that I've been on, I haven't fallen a single time just from stopping. Because I've really gotten good at like shifting my body completely off the bike as I'm coming to a stop to put my foot down. And then like my other leg is like sticking straight out because it doesn't go over the seat.
Yeah.
But then at least I can hold the bike up. So
Have you
it's
done
made a big
any
difference.
like static balance
Yes.
exercises? 'Cause
Yes, I
I
do a
think
lot of
those
static
really,
balance. Yeah, it that's one of the things that I've worked on. It's been a lot of static balance, but it's been a lot of um just getting used to moving so much on the bike. Like body position is really important, and like you should never really be static on your bike when you're riding. But for me, it's even more important because of the fact that I'm so small. Like when
yeah.
I'm going through a rock garden, I really have to, use that balance to counter my weight because if I try to dab, I'm reaching a lot further down or, I have to stretch my leg in a way that's going to throw off my balance. And it's not ideal, but it's either that or lower the bike. And I'm really stubborn and I refuse to lower the bike.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I've also been told by a lot of pros not to lower it. That if I could like work hard now and figure out how to ride it the way that it is, that it'll benefit me more. Just because of like the style of riding I want to do and the travel I want to do and like all these other things. So um I'm okay with struggling right now. Now, when I go through a hard enduro, I might change my mind.
Right. Yeah,
But, it's a different kind of struggle.
it's yeah, it depends, I guess, on what you want to do with the hard enduro because it for sure in most situations is very beneficial to have at least one of your feet on the pegs.
Mhm,
But at the same time, if you can dab instead of crashing, that is also
mhm.
a benefit. So there's some trade offs there for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
And but I'm sure the other thing that you'll probably, I mean, I'm sure you're finding, and you'll become better and better at it, is because the woods generally are not flat, and there's
Mhm,
usually a lot of places where you can dab that you don't have to get all the way down off the bike to essentially dab because they're way
mhm,
higher. So
mhm.
that's another skill that you'll see a lot of pros use. And like I kind of find myself already doing it subconsciously. If I'm going through a rock garden, a lot of times like I'll plant my foot somewhere, and sometimes I'm even surprised. I'm like, I didn't even notice that tall rock was there, but my brain has seen that, hey, you're going past this tall rock, and it
Yeah,
dimensionally knows that, okay, if I need to dab, there's this big rock right here.
yeah.
And it's kind of a one of those skills that just develops from just riding a lot.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've only done a couple rock gardens so far, and I fell a lot in the first little bit, but then after I started realizing that I was looking down and my friend kept telling me, "Look straight, don't look down." Even though I'm like trying to figure out where I'm going, I'm like looking straight ahead and where I
Yeah.
want to go. Obviously, that's a big thing, and that really helped and made things a lot easier. So, but I don't have a lot of experience in rock gardens as of right now. But the little bit that I do, I definitely I mean, I actually kinda liked it a little bit more because the rocks are higher than the normal trail, so it was easier to put my foot down if I
Right.
needed to. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's the I think where you might, and you might already have found this, where you'll potentially find issues is on hill climbs. I think
mhm.
that's where it's beneficial to be able to potentially sit your butt on the back of the seat and be able to dab with both
Yeah.
feet, um, especially on long hill climbs. And
Mhm.
I think the pros, they have kind of a specific technique, but that was a observation that I made with when I took the class with Cody. Like I made actually a comment to him because I don't think it was a hill climb related thing, but he was showing us how to do a double blip, and he
Mhm.
was like, "Yeah, I don't really like." I'm telling him, "It's like, do you move your, you know, weight all the way to the back during this part of it?" He was like, "No, I don't really move my weight that much." And then I'm like, "Let me just film you so you can see what you're doing," because I he's so tall that he doesn't
Yeah.
realize that him moving his hips back a little bit is like
Yeah.
literally beyond the edge of the seat.
Yeah.
So it's for like I'm reasonably tall, but even for me, that's like a pretty big stretch to do that. And
Yeah.
he's just so it's kind of funny. Some of the taller pros, they have. I mean, Cody is like a spider with his very
He's
long
ridiculously
limbs.
tall.
Yeah.
It was super funny trying to talk to him about whether or not I should lower my bike, and I was like, for reference, because it was a video chat, like, when you first sign up for the CW2 training, you can do, like, a video chat with him and talk to him.
Hmm.
So I was talking to him, and I was like, "For reference, I'm only 5 feet tall, and I have little teeny tiny crocodile legs. They're not like yours." I was like, "So I was like, having a normal sized bike is a big deal." So it was super funny. But he, I think kind of forgets that not everybody has super long legs like him. So,
Yeah.
but and I think unfortunately a lot of women have the same issue is that I know from talking to a lot of women that we're told that we can't be on big bikes because we have smaller legs or whatever. But um literally, if I can do it, anyone can because I'm like one of the shortest people out there. Like, I very rarely meet people shorter than me, especially at races and stuff. So, if I could do it, anyone else can. And it'd be really cool to see more women on big bikes and not feel like they're limited to these small bikes, which there's a lot of women who rip on small bikes, don't get me
Hmm.
wrong. But a lot of them are only on them because they think they can't handle a bigger bike because of their size.
Right.
So, and that really sucks. Like, I wish that that was something that would change, but um we need like a manufacturer to come up with a different smaller bike cuz I know there's the Beta, the cross trainer, but I personally when I rode cross trainers, I didn't like the way that they felt. So I decided to struggle bus on the Husky more because I liked the way that that felt. So,
Hmm.
not everybody's going to like one type of bike. So, that
It seems
part's
like it is changing a little bit just from
Mhm.
what I'm seeing in the industry in general. It's not changing probably enough to really facilitate, women, but I think
Mhm.
they're even realizing that most average men are struggling with the height of motorcycles, like with
Mhm.
specifically dirt bikes, because it's like even I don't know what the average. I think I'm probably like the most average person is that 5'11", and
Mhm.
like I can't flat foot an average dirt bike. Like I
Mhm.
can touch the ground, but I can't. I'm not gonna flat foot it.
Mhm.
And so I think they're starting to make slightly lower seat heights because nobody, especially average trail riders, like the people riding in Michigan, like I don't even know why people put skid plates on, because like you're never gonna hit anything with the bottom of that motorcycle. It's like, okay, you might have to go over a log once in a while, but it's like every, I don't know, 20 rides maybe.
Yeah.
And it's not like you don't need all that ground clearance all the time. And
Mhm.
2 inches of ground clearance, if you're going over a big log, is not going to make a difference anyway. It's really just your technique mostly, or how much you smash into the log.
Mhm.
So it's I think they should definitely make the bikes a little bit lower, especially on more on the like trail slash enduro side. Like I get motocross
Mhm.
bikes, yeah, you're doing jumps and whatnot, but you also don't really need to in like technical terrain. If you're dabbing, you're in a corner, so you're leaned over anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah,
yeah,
it'll be interesting to see which direction everything goes. I mean, with e-bikes now, that's like a totally different thing as well. All these electric bikes coming out. I mean, they seem to be a little bit smaller too. So uh, if
yeah,
if that's the future, that's your controversy right there. If that's the future of riding, then
yeah,
maybe it won't be such a big deal in the future, um,
yeah,
because they are smaller. They're still tall. Don't get me wrong. I still can't, put my feet down, but it's a little bit shorter stature. So it'll
yeah.
be it'll be really interesting to see how all that plays out. I was really I was thrown off. I didn't realize that there was going to be an electric bike class at TKO. That was crazy to me. Like, did you get a chance to see any of them racing?
Yeah, one of my buddies, Andy,
Mhm.
heavy enduro Andy. So he was actually racing basically a stock Suron, and he did pretty decent on it. I think.
Yeah.
I think he would have been not sick the last weekend. He would have probably done even better. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty cool, and it's growing too. Like last year, it was pretty big, but not as big, and this year it's even bigger. And I think there
Mhm.
is. I'm not really big into that scene, so I don't know that much about it. But it seems like there's people out there that are building these bikes specifically for for TKO, which is
Mhm.
pretty awesome. And it's one of those things that I think is really, it favors like the tinkerer, because you have
Mhm.
so much it's so much easier to like package batteries and motors and whatnot, than an
Mhm.
engine. So you have all these, like, yeah, off the shelf Surons, all that's cool, but you have people that are putting like electric motors into YZ frame, or into a KTM frame, or into like all these home built motorcycles. That it's pretty
Mhm.
wild. And I think it's definitely the future, whether we
Mhm.
like it or not. um it's maybe further than it it's probably not going to be here super duper soon, but
Mhm.
long term, it's probably the future. Once we can figure out how to store a lot of electricity in batteries, which if you think about where we were 20-30 years ago, with the big batteries and the big flashlights that would last like a half an hour, versus
Yeah.
now we have lithium batteries in our phones and laptops that last all day long,
Yep.
which is pretty cool. So give it another 10-20 years, and who knows, it's like you might be able to charge your bike at home and then ride it for 2 weeks without having to charge it again.
That'd be crazy. But yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how all that goes. I was so thrown off because being media, I was taking pictures and I'm relying on the noise of the bike to know when to be ready. And then all of a sudden this bike's coming around the corner. I'm like, I
Yeah,
can't hear anything. It's like whispering.
yeah,
like
Yeah, they don't sound good. To me personally, I think electric vehicles sound very annoying to the like on the outside. It's
Yeah.
yeah,
There's a lot of, like, chain slapping is what I was hearing, and I was like, "Wait, that
yeah.
doesn't it sounds like something's breaking." Like
It's like an electric drill with chain slapping. That
yeah.
it's
It was a
it doesn't.
very unique experience.
Yeah, it sounds. I've ridden a few of them. You don't get that same noise when you're riding them. It's actually when you're riding them, it's a really cool experience because it's you hear the tires, you hear the suspension. It's kind of like
Mhm.
riding a mountain bike, which is cool too. Like the older I get, the more I appreciate the lack of exhaust noise,
Yeah.
especially when you're like just like I was saying, Romaniacs. I think I
Mhm.
had legit hearing loss after being on the bike for 7 hours a day for 4 days and listening to that. And whenever we do
Yeah.
longer, like in Romaniacs, I didn't wear earplugs, but usually when we do longer rides, like
Mhm.
trail rides or anything, if I'm going to be riding at any decent speed, like
Mhm.
I have to wear earplugs. Otherwise, I'm just going to have a headache towards the end of the day,
Oh,
which
jeez.
is, yeah, it's annoying, but that's what it is.
That's so crazy. But well, are there any other races overseas that you're planning on doing? Or are you
Yeah,
gonna go back to Romaniacs?
so I'm going to, or I'm 95% sure I'm going to go back to Romaniacs next year and do bronze class.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, like I was saying, I was kind of between bronze and iron class. I know quite
Mhm.
a few people that have done bronze class. I know most of them have that are kind of approximately my level. Most of them have
Mhm.
not finished bronze class, and I
Mhm.
wanted to go to Romania and get a finish, so I
Mhm.
don't have to come back and try to get a finish or try to bump down a class. So I'm happy
Yeah.
I went that way,
Mhm.
and now I'm ready to struggle properly. So I'm going to try and do bronze class next year, which is a lot more of a proper hard enduro, is my understanding.
Yeah.
Um, and then I'm actually thinking of doing XROS, which is it's approximately a month before Romaniacs, and it's in
Yeah.
Serbia. It's like a 6 hour
Yep.
drive from there. So if I talk to the Carpathian guys, they might be able to provide me a bike and service and that for that. If not, they know somebody that can. Um,
Nice.
so it'll be interesting. And then my tentative plan is to essentially just kind of stay out there for a month or maybe even 2 months and see if I can organize something either with the Carpathian folks or with somebody else to do some riding and training and everything because it's just going back to the training thing a bit like the I think the biggest difference this year that I've
Mhm.
seen in my own like my skills have jumped and abilities on the bike have jumped a ton in the past
Mhm.
probably 2 years, but mostly this year. Like I went from being like a mid pack C rider to like a top B rider.
Mhm.
Not in so much in hard enduros because those are pretty difficult for me, but like a local hair scrambles enduros and stuff, I can usually put it in the podium
Yeah.
without too much difficulty on a hard enduro bike with like a hard enduro moose a lot of times. So um, the biggest thing has been just riding. Like riding
Yeah.
once or twice a week is huge. It's super hard to do as far because it's so time consuming, but it
Yeah.
is really that's the best training you can do.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I'm gonna try to do those two. Maybe Sea to Sky. We'll see. It's it. The interesting thing about a lot of those races too is they're like kind of luxurious in a way. Like
Mhm.
Sea to Sky, you stay at like a 5-star resort with a pool
Mhm.
and palm trees. Really, almost the same thing in Romaniacs. You stay at like a 4-star hotel, um, versus any American enduro where it's like you're
You're
hopefully,
camping.
not in a tent in a muddy field and with overflowing porta potties type of thing. Yeah, making your own breakfast at 6 in the morning in the rain or whatever, instead of going to
Yeah.
like the super fancy European style breakfast buffet. Yeah, it's
And it
very
sounds like a total experience. Like just to go over there and be able to do that. That sounds
yeah
really cool.
yeah. It is very cool, and it's kind of a yeah it's a different almost style of racing because
Yeah.
uh, definitely way more expensive, obviously, because you're not paying. Romaniac's entry fee was $2,500, I think.
Wow.
So it covers the hotel and it covers a bunch of food, but
Mhm.
still, that's on a very different scale than $150 for a US hard enduro, or like $50 for a regular enduro.
Yeah. Yeah, that's slightly
Yeah,
different.
right. I don't. Yeah, I don't know how much was 20 or 50 times more than 50 times more.
It's a lot.
No, yeah, 50 times more than a regular enduro.
That's crazy. Wow. Well, cool. And then so you're gonna spend a lot of time over there, so you're probably gonna miss some of the US series next year?
There's not a ton aside from TKO. There's not a ton in the summer in the US.
Mhm.
I think our last race here is the Roar ones that are early May.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I'm going to try to do all the East Coast ones again.
Mhm.
West Coast is hard. It's even when you're on the West Coast, all the races are kind of far away from each other and spread out time
Mhm.
wise. So it's pretty difficult. Like even if I decide I'm gonna go out to hang out in, I don't know, California or Arizona or New Mexico for a few months, you're still driving
Mhm.
like 10 hours between the different races or more.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's big.
Yeah, that's
If
been wild to me being on the East Coast and being able to be like, "Oh, I'm gonna go drive like 3 states over and it takes like 2 hours," or,
yeah,
well, that was in the Northeast, but still, I'm used to, because 'cause I'm from Arizona, so I'm used to having to drive all that time to get to California or Texas or whatever. Like,
yep.
it's crazy to me that you can get places so quickly out here.
Yeah, yeah. When I lived in San Diego for a bit, and it always amazed me like how like gas is like even then it was like $6 a gallon. Like how is everybody getting in their big pickup trucks and towing their toy haulers at 8 miles a gallon into the desert,
Yeah.
5 hours one way every weekend? Like oh my God, how are these people affording any of this? Like I get that you
We
can
go back to
mortgage
magic.
a house, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, lots of
Well,
debt.
what's your favorite US race that you've done?
It's a hard question. Um, every time I do a race, I always think, oh, this is probably my favorite race. So I actually really like TKO,
Yeah.
because I like the multi-round format. Actually, I like that it's a little bit easier, so you actually like go places. You don't sit in a bottleneck for forever or drag your bike up a hill for a long time.
Yeah.
Um, so I do like that one, but actually also really like River Monsters just because I really like Kairos. I really like that property. Um,
Mhm.
and I always do really badly at that race because there's a lot of hill climbs, and that's
Yeah.
probably my the weakest point of my riding. But it's just a really cool property. It's actually kind of similar to Romania in its terrain.
Mhm.
just in a much smaller scale. But it's yeah, I would say that probably those two, but I could. It's not a huge margin. Like I also really like tough or tough like Roar for sure because I
Yeah.
that's a also a cool race. I like that they do multiple different races for amateurs and for the pros, and they escalate in difficulty. I like
Hmm.
Shotgun because that property is cool, and the course also kind of ramps up in difficulty.
Hmm.
And the camping there is really nice because you're a nice grassy field, and
Hmm.
I and I like Battle of Goats because it's brushy is awesome, and I think the community around Brushy and Tyler and Zach and everybody, like they are like such good people, and they're
Yeah.
super passionate about the sport.
Hmm.
So like I spent a little bit of time there this winter, and I already felt like family. Like it's
Yeah.
a place where I can show up on a weekend, and
Hmm.
I'll be driving in there with my van, and my dog gets excited because she knows I can. I'm just going to open the door, and she just goes, runs around, and goes plays with Sky with their dog out there, and
Yeah.
it's just like very homey atmosphere.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Brushy's
that's a total non-answer,
awesome.
but I think they're just
So all the above.
yes. I honestly just think you can't go wrong because all the races are so different, and all of them have something that's kind of cool. I think if somebody is trying to figure out like if they're just going to do one race, and especially if it's their
Hmm.
first one, like I would
Hmm.
probably say either Kairos or TKO. Um, Kairos is probably a little bit better because it's less stressful. TKO is such a big thing; it's kind of stressful.
Yeah.
Or Tough Like Roar, because they're just a little bit easier. Like
I
the
don't know.
other
Roar looked pretty intense.
the amateur course is not very hard. Um, it's they make it so that it's kind of finishable. That
Hmm.
because the problem with something like brushy is so difficult that it is entirely possible that like you make it like a mile in, and it's just, especially if it rains, and it's just impossible.
Yeah.
So, and Kairos in a way is the same way. Like Kairos got some hills that if they're wet,
Hmm.
I know a number of people that are sea riders that they would get stuck very early on, like a mile or a mile and a half into the course, and they would just
Hmm.
get stuck on a hill basically forever.
Yeah.
And it's not super fun. Like if you end up making it up the hill, it's really rewarding, even if it took you
Hmm.
3 hours. But it's not super fun to be that defeated. I think it's good to be feel at least somewhat accomplished to at least
Yeah.
go, and make it a checkpoint. So I think TKO and Tough Like Roar do a good job of escalating the difficulty.
Yeah. It's good. Good to know. I'm definitely I'm trying to figure out which one I'm gonna do. My friend tried to tell me to come to Page and do Page first, and I was like, that's that's sketchy.
Yeah, never been there, but it looks high consequence.
Yeah, and the thing is like that rock, like I've ridden rock that's similar to it. I haven't been out there specifically, but I've ridden stuff that's similar to it, and it's just it is usually very grippy, but I don't have enough experience that I think that it would mentally get to me just cuz there's
Right.
so much exposure that I don't know that I could do that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's maybe another thing to consider is how much you value your motorcycle, because either one of the Pennsylvania races is
Mhm.
very motorcycle destructive.
Mhm.
Just because we're kind of narrowing it down to TKO now. Uh, Although I will say the brushy qualifier, if brushy is dry, the qualifier is
Uh-huh.
actually pretty easy. The
Yeah.
hardest part there is chicken fight.
Yeah.
So, which I'm sure you could do, like especially if you spend some time practicing there. Um,
Yeah.
and brushy doesn't is not very motorcycle damaging typically because it's not as rocky. There's a lot more
Yeah.
dirt. Um, Roar and Shotgun, those two races, it's just there's a lot of pointy rocks, and
Rocks everywhere.
every 10 hours on a motorcycle there look like 100.
Yeah.
So that's I don't know how important your motorcycle is to you, but that's something to consider as well. Like you're probably going to need to buy a new pipe after one of those races.
Pipe is fine. Everything else, not so much.
Yeah.
But that's good to consider. I definitely like my bike, so I definitely don't want to destroy it. Especially because it's not even a year old yet. But we'll we'll see what ends up happening. I think a lot of it will also depend on where I am at the
Hmm.
time that everything starts. So, if I end up being really close and I can drive, that might play a little bit more of a factor into which one I end up doing. But I had so many people telling me that I should do TKO like this last weekend when we were there. And I was like, why? Like, they're like, just do it, just do it. So now it's in my head that I should just do it. So
Yeah. Yeah. The
I don't know.
TKO course was not, there were some spots, but it was not crazy. There's, yeah. The other thing is, I don't know if it's happening, but I've heard that they might be doing a hard enduro at Doe Mountain, which is kind of
Oh,
your local riding area. This
yeah.
somebody was saying that it might be this fall, but I don't know if it's still something that's happening.
Interesting, because I just rode there the other day and I haven't heard anything about it. So I'll have to talk to them and see
Yeah.
if that's something that's going to be on the books or not. Because I like Doe. Doe, there's a lot there.
Yes.
There's a
They have
lot
a
of potential for it for sure.
they have a lot of property, and it's there's
Mhm.
which if you've talked to them, you probably might have heard of some of the issues about putting trails in that they've had historically.
Mhm.
There's and this is something I've heard from the locals there when I was hanging out there a bit. Yeah, that there was apparently a bunch of mining there in the past, and they
Mhm.
screwed up the water table um, by probably just drilling too deeply and whatnot. So water is a huge thing in
Mhm.
that area, so they are very very protective of it, which is why
Mhm.
they're very very cautious about how and where they put trails because they don't want a bunch of runoff from ORV activities going
Yeah.
into drinking water because I think most people there get their water probably from the creeks.
Mhm.
Um, but they years back they had a hard enduro there. I think it was called the Sasquatch. You can probably find YouTube videos of it, um, which looked pretty cool. It will be interesting because, as you know, Doe is a lot of tunnels of rotos, which for
Mhm.
anybody listening to this, they're like this bush slash tree with really, really curly, curvy branches that don't move out of the way for the life of them. So
Yeah.
when trails get made anywhere kind of in the North Carolina area in the
Mhm.
mountains there, they pretty much have to chop tunnels through these rhododendron bushes, and
Mhm.
you will not bushwhack through that for ever. Like it is just not possible.
Just like bounce off of it.
Yes, yes, bounce off
Yeah.
and or get stuck forever. They do not move out of the way. Um, so
Yeah.
it will be a challenge trying to make it so that it's not so there's multiple lines and whatnot through some of the technical sections. There's
Mhm.
I don't know if you've been to Horsepower Hill at Doe, which is there's some probably stuff that I don't know about, but that is probably one of the more challenging climbs there. It's,
Interesting. I don't know what I did. I just know that I did some single track and I did a climb, a hill climb, and it was really funny because I made it up the hill climb and I did it pretty well, which was impressive to me because I we got there before the rest of the group because we took a different direction. And I was like, well, I'd like to go up the hill before anybody else gets here because I don't want people to see me like trying and failing 100 times. I was like, so I'm just gonna get this over with. And then I made it right up. And then the group came and everybody else, I guess, decided to go a different direction, but the one guy came up the same way. And when he did, um, he struggled a little bit. Like he dabbed, he almost went backwards on his bike. And I was like, oh shit. And I was like, okay. And then he just kept going. And the guy that I was with goes, he's a hard enduro rider. And you just did that way better than he did. And I was like, all right, I feel good about this.
yeah,
Like,
I mean,
because
you,
it wasn't as much of a struggle for me as I thought it was going to be, despite the fact that there were roots and like a ledge in that hill. Like, it's pretty easy. So,
yeah, yeah. Well, there you go. You're ready.
I don't know about that. I might have just gotten lucky. So, next week, I'm going to go back and I know exactly where it is. So, I'm going to try and get back there and just see if it was luck or see if it really
Yeah,
is like that I'm using the right technique. And I mean, I did, uh, I did kind of get some confirmation that my technique is pretty good because I did some riding on a trials bike. And, they say that that's going to show you where your technique is lacking. And I was kind of thinking, I wonder how much my bike is just me, kind of sending it and relying on the power of my bike versus my skill to make it up some of the stuff that I do. But doing it on a 125 trials bike really showed me that I did know what I was doing. So that was pretty cool. I was pretty excited about that. And that was just more like inspiration for me to just push and keep working on my skills cuz like I mean I'm probably never going to like get a number 1 on podium or anything, but I'd still like to be semi-competitive. So,
yeah. And it's one of those things too. Like, I think everybody's at a different place on their
mhm,
journey,
mhm,
and it's it's hard. I mean, I think all of us are competitive to a certain degree, which is good because it pushes us forward. But at
yeah.
the same time, like I kind of like thinking about the this whole dirt biking progression too, as like it's like you're just on a really long trail hike. Like it's not a hike like a mile hike to the top of a mountain. It's more like a Pacific Crest Trail type of thing. And just because somebody is 100 miles in front of you doesn't mean they're having that much better experience than you are. You having an equal experience. Like I'm sure Tristan Hart will go out riding this week and he'll learn something, he'll practice something, he'll get something, and it's going to be super satisfying. Just like one of us, you know, noobs compared to him, will go out riding and try something that is way, way easier and we'll get it and it will be super satisfying. So
Yeah.
we're all having a good time at whatever level we're at.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
I that is one thing that I took from a friend of mine told me just ride your ride. And like that's pretty much what I've done since then. Like I don't focus on what people around me are doing, but at the same time, like if I get into a hard enduro, obviously like the first one's going to be totally just like probably survival mode and just trying to figure out what the heck I'm doing. But eventually, I think it'd be really cool to be able to be a little bit competitive. Like I
Yeah.
said, I don't expect a number 1, but just not number last.
It's a and it's a learn every event is a learning experience. Like I've done I mean this is my second year, so not it's not like I've been doing it for many years, but
Mhm.
every hard enduro I think I've done probably 10, no, probably almost 20 events now. And and every one of them I still learn a ton, even if it's one that I've done before. So it's
Mhm.
every one is a learning experience, and I think everybody, even the pros who've done maybe hundreds of races, they learn all the time. And yeah, and
Yeah.
with dirt bikes too, like you said, I mean, you do have to ride your own ride because you never know. You never, especially on a trail ride, like you never know who you're riding with. You
Mhm.
might, it's like you might think you're like go out and I do this all the time because I'm a guy and we're like naturally too competitive for our own good. I'll go out and riding with somebody that I might like I don't know very well. And I'm like, oh,
Uh-huh.
it's like I do some racing, I do pretty well, and this guy's being all slow. And then all of a sudden they'll turn it up, and turns out they were like an ex-pro motocrosser or something like that, and they're like, were paid to get to ride a dirt bike for a decade, and they were just
Mhm.
riding at like 40%, and now they're riding at 80%, which is 120% for me.
Yeah.
As you know, like there's no lying in dirt biking. Like you can't fake it. You might
Mhm.
fake it for like one corner, but probably not even one corner. If you
Yeah.
just don't have the skill to go around a corner or to go that fast, you will just immediately fall down. Feedback
Yeah.
loop is very, very short.
Yep. I would always rather undersell my ability when it comes to like going on a trail ride with people, um, rather than admit where I think I'm actually at. Because I'm just like, I would rather people be pleasantly surprised that I'm better than I think I am than be like, oh yeah, I'm actually pretty good, and have them be like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a balance too. Like I think you are probably progressing pretty quickly because you do ride with people that are good. Um
Mhm.
and the but you also, yeah, you don't want to get into a group where it's just going to be, dangerous for everybody. Like if
Yeah.
there's definitely it, and it's only I've never seen a woman do this again. I think this is a male thing where people will go into a group or go on a ride where they're way above their skill level, and they're trying to either go too fast, which is usually in Michigan we don't have anything too technical, so people will just ride
Mhm.
too fast. And I see this usually immediately, especially if I've ridden with somebody before, and then
Mhm.
I ride with them like 2 weeks later, and they're all of a sudden going a lot faster. I'm like, this is not safe. this something bad's gonna happen. Or they're like riding kind of slowly in the morning, and then in the afternoon all of a sudden they're like averaging 5 miles an hour faster. Like I need to tell them to slow down because it's like they're gonna hurt themselves.
Yeah. Well, and I think that I'm pretty good about, like I said, the ride your own ride thing. I mean, I was in a group and we had from well, I was the slowest person in the group. Everybody else was A class riders, former pro motocross or pro rider of some sort. And then there's me. And I was like, I'm so out of my element right now.
Yeah.
But everybody understood where my level was, and it was like they understood. They had somebody behind me and they switched off, which made me feel a whole lot better that I wasn't ruining someone's day. Like that's my worst thing is like I will try really hard to keep up, but I know I'm not going to with those guys. Like they're ridiculously fast. They took off before I could even like pull my foot up off the ground. They were around the second bend and I was like, "Oh, what?" Um
Yeah.
so, but I did get to the point where like I wasn't super far behind because I pushed myself a little bit, but I didn't do it to the point where it was unsafe. And part of that comes from the fact that I ride alone a lot, which is not safe and I do not recommend unless you absolutely have to, but with how much travel I do and the fact that I don't know a lot of people, um it's been something that I've had to do. So obviously when I ride alone, I'm not going out and trying to do hard enduro. I'm not trying to push myself. I'm more working on my, clutch skills and things like that. Most of the time I'll do trail rides like every weekend, but I keep it pretty chill, keep it pretty easy, and I don't do anything that's too crazy. I save that for when I am around people. But that's the thing, is that now when I am around people, I push myself a lot more, because now I'm like, okay, I'm safe, like to an extent, I'm not going to go like try some insane stuff, but I'm going to push myself, and I'm going to, do hill climbs in front of people that like scare the crap out of me. Like,
And that's
I wouldn't have done that a year ago.
probably, so that's like a whole other podcast, of riding alone versus not riding alone, because I think there's pros and cons to that. And I'm trying to think who it was. I think it might have been Josh, actually, of Enduro Method, and they were talking to some trainer. Or it was some discussion about pro riders, and one of the things that is mentioned actually pretty often that I've seen is that like training by yourself is actually the most efficient way to do it. From what they find, is because you're always, when you're riding in a group, you're always kind of trying to find like the least common denominator, which might not necessarily be, or you're maybe even riding to the average of the group or something like that. So you're not necessarily working on the skills that you need to work on. You're working on, I don't know, whatever the group wants to do. So most of the time you end up just trail riding. So it's really hard to work on specific elements and do drills and do exactly what you want to ride to do. So like I ride by myself quite a bit, for that reason, because like I've kind of, as I started progressing more, I started realizing that, again, trail rides super fun, huge waste of time. If you're trying to learn, I think
Yeah.
Dylan on your previous podcast said when he was riding with
Uh-huh.
Tristan was like, "Why are we riding 10 minutes to this hill climb? It's a waste of
Yeah.
time." He's
Yeah.
100% right. He's like, it's like you don't go to the gym to, like, I don't know, walk around the gym for 10 minutes to get to your equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it and when you're by yourself, you can work exactly on what you want. Uh, Obviously, with a group, there's a margin of safety in that you can try sketchy stuff, but
Yeah.
you're also trying sketchy stuff that maybe you shouldn't be trying in certain situations. And
Yeah.
it's like I've seen, I think it's less dangerous with hard enduro because you're like, worst case where you don't make a hill climb, you fall over type of thing. It's more dangerous that I've seen with faster riding when you're trying to, like, here in Michigan, a lot, even a single track is like you're averaging 20 miles an hour if you're
Yeah.
going a pretty good clip or more. So it's not unusual. Like, I did an enduro a couple weekends ago. My top speed was like 50 plus miles an hour, and it's if you're riding with different skill levels, it ends up being the whole thing. Like the fast guy is getting chased by a slower guy who's like barely keeping up. The slower guy is like, riding above his limit. The faster guy is like, I know the guy behind me is slower. Why is he keeping up? I'm going to ride faster. So now the slower guy is really pushing himself, and eventually
Yeah.
somebody is riding above what they should be riding comfort level wise. So that's my thought on that. And yeah, plus I have an InReach, so that's my comforting thing as far as riding by
Yeah.
myself.
I do too.
It's in some cases you also have to be realistic. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I depending on who you ride with. Like I ride with a lot of people where I'm the one that's usually carrying the tools, and it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, it's yeah. I don't know. I don't know how much good they'll be if I hurt myself. They're like don't even have a screwdriver.
Yeah. No, I'm
So
usually the pack mule because I'm at the back. So,
yeah, I like being self sufficient. I don't. And part of that's part of dirt biking for me is like it's
yeah.
your the personal responsibility. You're responsible for yourself, your machine.
Mhm.
You're out in the woods. Gotta be smart.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think definitely, like you said, we can totally have a whole nother episode just on that because there's so much to it, right? Like, there's so many different layers to how much you should or shouldn't push yourself and things like that. Safety is huge. Like I said, I have an inReach as well. It's really good peace of mind.
Hmm.
My mom actually got it for me because she was not happy that I was going out hiking by myself.
Yeah.
I went out to Montana hiking and she was just like freaking out. I was like, it's an opportunity. Like I had never been to Montana. I really wanted to go. And it's the same way that I look at riding. Like I said, if I have to wait for somebody else, I'm never going to get to go because I'm
Yep.
just so far away from people that I know. And I'm not extroverted enough to like just go out and make friends everywhere I go. It may not seem like that, like at the races and stuff, but like I'm a lot more extroverted at the races because of the people that I'm around. Like we're all kind of the same type of person. And
Right.
so I'm a lot more comfortable. But if you see me like out in the real world, I am quiet. I don't talk nearly as much. Like
Yeah.
it's just I'm like super, super introverted. So it's really hard for me to meet people to like go running with or go hiking with and stuff like that. So I go by myself and that just ends up to flow over to riding right now. Thankfully here in Tennessee, I actually know I knew some people already around here and I know people out by Brushy. So Brushy's like 2 hours away from me.
Mhm.
So it's really nice to know that if I do want to ride with people or if I'm able to ride like on the weekend, then I can actually have people around to ride. So I shouldn't have to ride by myself as much unless I'm doing those training days during the week. So,
And
which
it's
I try and do twice a week. So,
the East Coast is that specific area. That's like the hard enduro mecca of the United States because there's so much. There's a bunch of different properties where you can ride.
mhm.
You're within 5 hours of all of them. You know, TTC, Windrock, Kairos, Brown, Brushy,
Mhm.
Hatfield, McCoy.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's tons of stuff.
Yeah. And I heard there's some stuff in Kentucky as well. Um, I don't remember the names at the moment, but my
Yeah,
plan is to try and go to every state in this area um, and ride at least one place in each state because I think that'd be cool. I
yeah,
like to see
sure.
different terrain. I think I've ridden 12 states now, and it's really cool to just see how different riding can be in different places, even if they look very similar. I would have thought that Maine and Minnesota would be very similar. But even though it looks like it at the trailhead, once you get onto the trail, Minnesota's like Michigan, probably very flat, not very rocky. There's some roots, but nothing crazy. And then Maine was insane. Like Maine is rocks, tons of
Hmm.
roots, tons and tons of roots. And it's like root tangles that are like 5 feet long. And if there's any kind of precipitation, that's super slippery. So
Yeah,
it's way, way different than Minnesota.
yeah. Even in the area where you're at, like Doe and Brushy, completely
Mhm.
different terrain. And then I don't know if
Mhm.
you've been to Brown Mountain yet. Brown Mountain is
Mm-mm.
completely different. It's actually I think it's within like an hour of Brushy, but it
Mhm.
is giant rocks. It almost looks like something out of like out west, like Moab. like
Yeah.
huge big boulders, very very flat, like sandstone type boulders.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well,
it's very
I'm excited.
yeah, it's very
I'm
cool.
really
If you
excited to explore.
you'll need to go there somewhat soon. Well, actually, I don't know how long you're in Tennessee because your Brown is closed from. I'm trying to remember when. Beginning of the year, I think January 1st through like either March or May, end of March, I think.
Hmm.
So they're closed
Okay.
in the winter, which is pretty annoying because that's usually when I'm in North Carolina.
You're like, come on, this is my time. Yeah. I'm here at least until the middle of November. And then it'll depend on if I extend my contract, which at this point I'm not planning on extending, but I don't know where I'm going to go next. I won't know until probably October. So
Gotcha.
we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah.
But as of right now, yeah, the plan is just to be here until mid-November and ride as much as I can in as many places as I can to get essentially as much training and exposure to different terrain as I can. So,
Yeah. Cool.
yeah.
Awesome.
So, well, thank you for meeting with me. I think this ended up being a little bit better than meeting at TKO, where it was like insanely hot and having to do it like outside and no AC.
Yes, and my honestly, my brain was so fried after being out riding the heat the entire time. It would have been
Yeah.
just a bunch of rambling, probably.
Yeah, and I was running around helping with staging and stuff, so I was pretty frazzled by the end of the day too. I think
Yeah,
one of the days I was there almost 13 hours, so
yeah.
it's pretty rough.
It takes it takes a lot out of you, but I mean it's
Yeah,
awesome that you got to help out, and
yeah,
we
yeah.
need
That was
people
really
to help
cool.
out to make these things happen. Um,
Hmm.
I selfishly have not helped out anything, so I appreciate somebody doing it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm there anyway, and all I'm doing is taking pictures. I'm not racing. I'm not there to like be rider support or anything like that. So it's I'm happy to do it. I was a little selfish because I did run away after getting people ready for staging, and I went and got pictures like when the pros started and stuff. But like, how often do you get to see people like Graham
Right.
Jarvis and Manny Lettenbichler and them like race over here? So I was like, I just want to go over for that. And then I did and I came right back, but still it was it was pretty cool and it was an awesome experience. So
Yeah.
I'm
TKO is a good one to go to for sure. As a
mhm.
such a cool event.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I'm already excited for next year.
Cool. Yeah, I hope you get to actually race it. I mean, yeah,
With
it's
as many people who are pushing me to do it, I don't think there's any way I'm not going to be able to do it. I
yeah,
think there's a lot of people that believe in me and it's kind of incredible to me cuz 95% probably haven't ever seen me ride. So and they're like you can do it. And I'm like but what if I can't? Like I I
and
honestly
that's the
think I
thing is,
can, but it's just
like
crazy.
I was saying, is that's the best thing that you can do to get into anything is you just have to go and try it.
Yeah.
There's you can overanalyze things to death, and otherwise it's yeah, best thing to do is just to get out there and give it a go.
Yep.
It's usually that's my theory, and that's what I've done typically. Usually without
Yeah.
not knowing what I'm doing, and luckily most of the time it works out okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. So, well, thank you again for meeting with me. I really appreciate it. And I'm super excited to see what the next year brings for you, how many of these races you end up doing overseas. And um, it'd be really cool if you do all three of the ones that you want to do. It'd be like you're competing in the world circuit. Like, that's freaking awesome.
Competing might be a strong word, but it will be. It would be awesome. It would be an awesome
I mean, you're
experience for
competing.
everyone.
You're not competing against like Graham, but
Right. Yeah.
you're still competing.
Yes. Yes. For sure. Yeah. It should be cool. I'm definitely looking forward to it.
I'm excited to see, and I look forward to more of your after race reviews because that was really cool that you did that after everything in Romania. It was cool. I was like looking forward to that every day. I was like, what was it like today? So
Yeah.
that was awesome.
Yeah. I almost did it more for myself than necessarily even other people because it's so with any of these events there's so much so quickly that you just forget everything that happened. So it's cool to
Yeah.
have those memories.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you again, and we will talk to you again soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.